Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, the Gritty Broman, also known as Brent. Brent Call, B. Rent.
I like how you say it like you're like, what's your name again? What is it again?
My large and in charge little brother is with me here. And Brent, today's podcast is with our friend Tyler Sharp, who is the editor-in-chief of the Modern Huntsman. For those who don't know, the Modern Huntsman is a biannual publication. They have 3 volumes out right now. The 4th is on the way here soon. And it's more like a book than it is a magazine or a journal.
Yeah, because when you say publication, I think I'm going to be getting a magazine in the mail every day.
No, it's legit. It's like a book. Brent was saying it was like the Meat Eater's cookbook.
It looks like when I first saw it, I was like, Meat Eater, new book.
And it's very well done. It's beautiful. It's got lots of cool articles, and there's contributors from all walks of life that are contributing to the articles in here, from scientists to YouTube sensations, YouTubers like Dude Perfect.
My hero, I think my hero. Oh, there he is, my hero.
We have Donnie Vincent in here. You have Simon Roosevelt, who I think is the great-grandson of Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes. I want to know who does these pictures.
It's hard to know.
They are top-notch.
They're well done. It's beautiful publication. Now, for those who don't know, it comes out, twice a year, or biannual. I'm just going to read a little bit from the mission here. It says, for many of us, hunting is a way of life, a tradition passed down by our grandfathers, fathers, and brave mothers. It's a way of staying connected to the land and harvesting wild food to sustain our families, and is a shared passion in most countries the world over. Hunting also plays a major role in conservation, which ensures that wildlife populations thrive and expanses of land stay untamed. We can all agree on that. Mm-hmm. Now, he says later, this isn't just for hunters, though. And while we know that there will be opposition, we believe that through our collective stories, photographs, and films, we'll be able to educate some folks about overlooked realities and win the minds and hearts of those who still have them open. And so Tyler and I get into this conversation on today's podcast where we talk about how, this publication is for the hunter and for the non-hunter, and probably, more for the non-hunter. It's taking our message and giving it to the non-hunter in a way that they can understand it, embrace us, and be part of our community.
That's a fine line because our way of life involves killing.
Yes.
At the end of the day, hunting is killing. And for a lot of people, that right there is a line in the sand. And it's very hard for them to get past that.
But you and I both know that food
is all
that we all consume food and we care about where it comes from. We all pretty much love animals, and we don't want to see any undue suffering with an animal. And so we all, there's a lot of common ground. Mm-hmm. And I think we've made a lot of headway in the non-hunting community with guys like Joe Rogan and Dude Perfect in here. Mountain Ops did a hunt with Dude Perfect. They're in this magazine or in this publication, and it's called When the World Is Watching. And I think Dude Perfect is out there making videos about shooting baskets from far away,
shooting deer.
But now they're moving into they hunt a lot. But there's so how much of their hunts can they share publicly without losing sponsors and their way of life and their income or alienating a whole crowd of people? Right, like Rogan was able to bring hunting to his community and. Yes, there were some who hate him for it, but for the most part, I think his audience was well balanced and they've received it, and he's been able to introduce hunting to a demographic that otherwise wouldn't have known about it.
And I think that only comes through long format conversations.
Yeah, or publications like this where you can sit there and read and have an interview. I think the guys at Dude Perfect are doing the best they can to bring their message to the mainstream without, shooting themselves in the foot. And alienating an entire demographic. But like you said, like walking the line is tough because here you are trying to craft a message that the non-hunter can view as valuable and understand it while not like ditching your roots.
I feel like the average hunter doesn't want to soften the message. I feel like we're aware of what we do. And so we don't want to use the words harvest. I feel like some people are a little touchy about those kinds of things.
Right. And I think it's a valid point too, because a publication like this can come off as elitist or purist.
Totally.
If done
hipster hunter,
right? Like we do it the right way, and you all do it the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
I brought that up with Tyler. I wanted to know what he thought about it.
Yeah, you kind of threw that at him, like right in his face. He's like, well, he took it in stride, and he was actually kind of excited to answer that question for you.
Yeah, and I think he did a good job answering it.
He did.
And so I'll let you guys listen to it. I'll quit talking about the publication, and we'll just get into the podcast. Before we do, we are doing a giveaway. We are giving away a set of Leupold binoculars, 42 millimeter or 10 by 42 binos. They're the Santiam BX5. They're the top of the line Leupold. I love these. Still in the box, brand new. Smells like
high expensive.
So pretty sweet binos. And
Brian, how did the folks get their hands on that?
So all you got to do is sign up for the newsletter to be entered to win. So go to briancall.com and sign up for the newsletter.
Scroll down to the bottom. It's right there.
Yep. Sign up for the newsletter, and we promise we will not send you a ton of emails because we're too lazy. We do not send out emails very often.
We've been doing one a week. Go us.
Yes, go us.
And that's because we have the series going right now.
Yeah, we're producing. Brent's working overtime. I am too to produce this tar.
So is intern
film.
Brad.
Yeah, intern Brad is kicking butt too. So we are putting together our New Zealand do-it-yourself public land 5-part hunt, and we released 2 parts already. Mm-hmm. We're going to release each part every Sunday. So we got 3 more parts, so 3 more Sundays of
And the following
content.
Sunday is when we'll announce who the winner of the binos.
Yeah, after we release all 5 parts of the film, we're going to announce the winner around September 15th.
Yes.
So you got till mid-September to sign up for the newsletter. Don't wait. Do it now, though. briancall.com, and you're entered to win. And then we also have a coupon code at Mountain Ops, Gritty. Use that code when you're buying your Mountain Ops, and you'll get a discount. It's going to change from time to time. Mm-hmm. We're trying to boost that discount right now. I think right now it's just at free shipping.
For right now, it's free shipping, but things can change, folks.
Yeah, it could be 10, 20%. It'll move around on you, so it's kind of a surprise code. But
yeah, you might order. You might get a free shirt. You might get a coaster. You might just get free shipping. Yeah, always punch it in. See what happens.
So that's how it works, friends. And then we also have a code with Bryce, our buddy over at Sissy Sticks.
I like you, Bryce, but you spell your name with an I. I don't like that.
Brice.
Brissy. Brissy.
Bryce.
Anyway, Bryce Manley,
get 15% off.
Yes.
Is that what it is? 15% off of a pair of Sissy Sticks, trekking poles. Mm-hmm. And
you won over Lampers with those. He wasn't sure about those.
Yeah, and I'll be straight up. You know, Ryan has a pair of black diamonds that he's had for years, and he loves those as well. They don't really make them anymore. But we both love aluminum because carbon fiber breaks. It's not built the same. At least aluminum bends. But these poles are great because they have a carbon upper and a aluminum lower. And so if they do get stuck in the rocks or whatever, it's always at the bottom, and that's where it's the skinniest too. The aluminum just bends if it is under extreme pressure, and we just bent it back. But I mean, we put that through hell.
Watch the video, folks. You can see what they did. It was dumb.
It was a little intense.
Every animal down involved a downhill night hike in the snow.
Yeah, it was a little intense. It was scary at times. There was some. I was saying this in the edit I was doing today. I was watching the video, and I'm like, the problem with this place is if you slip and you slide 50 feet, you also fall 50 feet straight off a bluff, or 100 feet, or 200 feet. Like everything ended with a fall to your death. And so it was a little sketchy. We really should have had bigger. We had like micro spikes, which we talk about, but we really needed true, legit crampons, some rope even, and some ice axes. That would have been ideal.
Climbing gear, basically.
Yeah, or not be up there in the first place time of year. So live and learn, folks. But check it out. I hope you guys are really liking that. And share it with your friends and like it, leave a comment. We really appreciate that. So
go watch our stuff on YouTube and share it. That's the biggest thing you can do. If you want to help us out, share the film.
Well, we're sitting here and we're trying to grow the video production side of what we do because we both love doing it. Brent and I love editing the videos.
We love podcasting, but making a film is just...
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's different. So we're doing both, but we really do want to grow that side of it. So anything you can do to help us is greatly appreciated. So let's dive into this podcast. Hope you enjoy it. And as always, stay gritty, friends. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. And today I'm excited about this interview. I have my guest, Tyler Sharp. And Tyler, you're the editor of the Modern Huntsman. A journalist? Would you classify what's your
without the whole like slash this slash that, right? So I've had a past life as a creative director. I'm a photographer. I'm a writer. I've also directed a lot of motion, documentary films and commercial pieces. And now I pretty much moved full time into basically I'm CEO and editor in chief of Modern Huntsman. So.
Okay. So the Modern Huntsman, how are you on your fourth? Are you getting ready to put out your fourth publication?
So we just released number 3 about a month ago, and we're working on number 4 right now, which is a women's issue, and that'll release in October. So yeah, this is number 4 in terms of the book, okay. Right? Because it's, as you've seen, it's not really a magazine. It's a 250-page book.
Right.
And so we're doing that twice a year. We're moving into more media stuff. My good friends, the Pace Brothers, we started working with them on their podcast. We're releasing some films. We're moving into nonprofit event kind of stuff. So there's more than just the book, but we're trying to make the book be the sort of manifesto, sit down and actually read in detail what we're really trying to say. So that's kind of the plan right now.
Okay. So let's get into kind of a description of what the Modern Huntsman is, so that people that are listening, they can that aren't familiar with it, they can get a quick rundown of that. And then I want to get into a little more about who you are.
Sure. So initially when we launched it was just the publication. So the kind of tagline motto is more or less a biannual publication focused on trying to improve the perception of hunting. That's now expanded into other medias outside of print, but the goal really is to both communicate to non-hunters, people outside of the hunting community, and then also where we feel it's necessary, try to improve communication in terms of hunting's role in conservation, in matters of PR, right? And a lot of what people see online who don't hunt is either misinformation or, a lack of education. And so, but in my opinion, and not just my opinion, but the team members and the contributors we work with, that the conversations that happen surrounding those misinformations and misunderstandings are often too emotional and they cease to be productive. So we're trying to take a little more of an objective, let's call it a scholastic, even-keeled approach to discussing what are otherwise pretty controversial topics, with the hope of not necessarily recruiting a bunch of new hunters. That'd be great, right? But more so improving the 80% of the population that doesn't hunt in the world, improving their favorability of what we do and why it's important.
Yeah, right here I'm going to read something from this recent issue, our mission. And you have in there at the beginning of the publication, it says, for those who don't know, Modern Huntsman is a biannual publication for like-minded conservationists, creatives, and outdoor enthusiasts, born out of frustrations with the way hunting is often misrepresented today. This publication is told from the perspective of hunting purists and the diplomatically minded, unaltered by the skews of mainstream media, corporate interests, or misinformed emotional rants. So that kind of goes right for the jugular there. It just kind of says it like it is. And so I'm excited to get into a conversation about this because I've had this conversation many times on the show actually, and some of it with some pretty heavy backlash at times. This very conversation is a heated can become very heated, where you have those maybe that feel like, hey, anyone who is watching from the outside looking in, that's not a hunter, they can just get over it because it's my right to hunt. They can just screw off. And then you have your other side of the house saying, I really am against all trophy photos and anything that shows something that can be, that can make hunters look bad in the eyes of the outsider or the non-hunter. And then you have all the spaces in between. So,
yeah.
So it's a good discussion, I think, to have. I think I also think it can very much, it's a touchy one. So we'll approach it with the best way we can. Before I do that, though, tell me a little bit more about you, Tyler. How old are you? Where are you from? What's your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 35 years old. I grew up in Texas in a combination of Austin and Dallas. And I went to college in Los Angeles. I went to USC and studied film and photography. And my first job out of college was in Tanzania. I moved to Africa when I was 22 and worked for a safari company and spent 6 months filming hunts. And it completely changed my life, right? I went from literally Compton to the middle of Tanzania, right? And this would have been 2006, 2007. And I mean, middle of nowhere, right? There was not even iPhones at this point. We had the sat phone and a CB radio, and that was it. And I mean, I got bitten, scratched, chased by everything, charged by lions, buffalo, elephant, everything. But, after a few weeks of getting my ass kicked, became, acclimated to the environment, learned how to track these game. And some of these trackers there are insanely talented. It's like a spiritual thing. And, we were eating what we hunted, and they had a shamba, which in Swahili means farm. They had this farm where they grew all the fresh produce, and literally we were eating everything that they grew and that we killed for 6 months, and just a completely life-changing experience. And when I came back to Dallas, I found out about Dallas Safari Club. And I was broke. Like, the company I worked for was kind of shady. They didn't pay me my work visa. They never got my work visa. My visa had expired. I had to bribe my way out of the country, and came back. Literally had $200 to my name, and went to the Dallas Safari Club show in 2007 with just a book I threw together on Blurb or something, and was just trying to find a way to get back over there, and started meeting people and making connections. And eventually met a guy named Corey Knowlton, who used to be on a couple shows with the Jim Shockey. And I started working for the Knowlton family. And then that led to filming for Shockey. So I filmed for the professionals for 2.5 years. And in that time, went to over 30 countries all over the world, filming hunts. Pakistan, Russia, 14 countries in Africa, Mexico, wherever they went. And during that experience, especially coming back to Texas, right? Texas is a pretty hunting-friendly state. But even in Texas, people would hear about what I was doing and hear about Africa and would have these emotional reactions and say things like, "Oh, I can't believe you're over there, watching people kill endangered animals." And I would say, "Well, what are you talking about? That's illegal. That's poaching. That's not hunting." And would have to explain that to them. And so I just, over the years, kind of observed two things. One, that for the most part, the hunting industry does a pretty terrible job of communicating to non-hunters. It's a fight in most cases, and not a very productive one. And then on the other side of that, most non-hunters either don't understand hunting's role in conservation, or they're deliberately misinformed by animal rights groups or sensationalized Facebook posts. And I just was really frustrated, and this was kind of an underlying theme of my work. And I kind of ran the course. The life of a hunting cameraman, the ceiling's pretty low, right? And it's not exactly like a retirement plan. So, I had a great experience. I got to see a lot of things. And then I kind of moved on and started doing more editorial work and working with brands like Filson and Stetson and Cabela's and things like that. And started doing more brand work and photography and motion directing. All the while still wanting to do something to address what I saw to be, things that needed to be righted in terms of the crossover between hunters and non-hunters. And so about 3 years ago, there were two co-founders of Modern Huntsman that are no longer working with the company, but I met them at a time, and they had sort of created an Instagram channel that was kind of like a creative exercise. They were just kind of showcasing creative work from hunters and fisher, anglers and all that represented visually a different style. And I said, this is interesting. And I reached out to them, and it turns out that they actually lived in Dallas, a couple of miles from me. So it was just sort of serendipitous. And I remember when I met him for the first time, I said, hey, this is going to sound weird because we just met, but what you're describing sounds like my life's work, and you probably just need to let me be your creative director right now. So I sort of commandeered the ship in a friendly, professional way and said, listen, because one of the guys was not a hunter, the other guy was a hunter, but really didn't even have social media, was never online, had certainly never been in like an international hunting setting. And I said, guys, you're going to get torn apart. I was like, I've spent my entire career navigating this overly complicated and unnecessarily political landscape. We have to be really, really careful. This is a rocky road ahead. There's going to be a lot of criticism, a lot of naysayers. There's going to be a lot of backlash from both sides. And we have to be really, really smart about the way we move forward and the way we say things, because you can't take it back. And if you make one misstep and you get blasted by one of these big animal rights groups, they're going to crush us, Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how it started. And we did a Kickstarter for our first issue and raised $100,000 to fund that, and called in a lot of favors from friends in the industry to help us do photography and writing, and kind of handpicked everybody. And miraculously, we did it. It almost killed me, but we did it. And so it's been a slow process of growing and adding to the team, and each issue we've tried to move further into that realm of let's call it crossover into a non-hunting world. And in fact, we have Patagonia's logo in Volume 3. I mean, that's, to my knowledge, the first time they've ever been in a hunting magazine. So, I think that it's working in certain ways. We're showing that we can have these conversations in ways that aren't ending in fist fights and people blocking each other and things like that. I mean, that's still going to happen, right? But I think in terms of the public that doesn't hunt, it's more about providing something that is a point of access, right? That they feel like, you know what, I feel safe reading about this. This is something I can relate to, versus a publication that's strictly about whitetail hunting that they have no relevant, no relation to. They don't know anything about that, so it's not going to interest them. So by design, this is more periphery, right? I still have to make it so that you and anyone else in the hunting community would at least agree with most of what we're saying, that we're still upholding the same values, right? And that we're still moving in the same direction, but we've slightly shifted the tone so that it appeals to people who don't hunt and that they can understand what we're trying to do here.
So, like, for example, we run into this issue when I talk to friends over at BHA, and and they have Patagonia come and speak at one of the night events, right? And then telling stories, and then I get a bunch of messages from people saying, "Hey, I can't support BHA and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers because they support Patagonia, and Patagonia just hosted an event for all of the animal rights activists over here, and they've basically gone anti-hunting on this with this group over here, and then which side are they? Is Patagonia on our side, or are they against our side? And you run into this where there's so much partisanship. It's really tough to have come together and actually have a dialogue, and especially one where people don't just immediately tune out. And it's always a question too, like, engaging with, let's say, a company like Patagonia is a great example, right?
Sure.
They reach a mainstream group. They have a massive outdoor presence, outdoor community presence. You kind of wonder where they stand in terms of hunting, but we can all agree, and we do agree, that public land is critically important. Maybe we don't agree on the hunting aspect. And so having that, being able to come together for, let's say, a public land debate and to actually mobilize to protect public lands is important. But then we get caught up in our differences as it relates to maybe conservation and hunting and hunting's role in conservation. And so how do you reconcile that? What's your take on that?
Sure. So I think we need to make a distinction here between what they think, right? Because Patagonia is a huge company, right? With a lot of individuals who probably have individual beliefs. And Yvon Chouinard's a hunter, right? But there's a difference between what he thinks as an individual and what their customer base thinks about who that company is, right? So if they make a radical departure from their fishing, ocean conservation, outdoor activity, and they take a hard right, all of a sudden they're talking about harvesting elk, people are going to freak out, right? So in the same sense that we're playing this long-term chess game, they would probably have to do something similar. So in our case, the reason they agreed to be in this issue is because we were doing a story about wild salmon versus farm salmon, right? And that's something that they focus on a lot. And sustainable sourcing of food, right? Ethical sourcing of food, right? Whether that's a fish or that's an elk, they're not going to say, hey, we're going to put an elk story, but it's moving closer towards that direction, right? And so your point earlier about people disagreeing on things and drawing a hard line in the sand and saying, we can't support this anymore because they said this. Well, that's the number one. I don't know about the number one. That is a main contributing factor to the fact that hunting numbers are declining in the United States, is an isolationist, us versus them mentality. It cannot be, and I wrote about this in my editor's letter for Volume 3, it cannot be us versus them anymore. That has not worked. It's only created a further divide, and wildlife and wild places are suffering, right? And it has to be both sides together against all of the international conservation issues we face. And so, in the same way that when one kid punches the other kid on the playground, they got to figure out a way to apologize to each other and play nice. That's what we're trying to do, right? And so we get a lot of crap because we got people in the magazine who aren't, quote, core hunters, right? And they're like, oh, you guys are letting the left in, you're greenwashing. That's the hard part, right? Is there's been so many heated, even political clashes over the years between hunters and animal rights groups, right? And we're not talking about animal rights groups per se, right? Those are not the people that are going to make policy changes. They're loud and they have a lot of money. It's the 70 to 80% of the population. I personally think that we need to take a different approach. And in my opinion, that if we can lessen the resistance among the 70 to 80% of people, let's call them hunting apathetic, right? Maybe they just don't know where they stand. Mm-hmm. In most cases, their beliefs currently are being swayed by what they see online. And there's a lot of anti-hunting stuff online, right?
Absolutely.
There's not as much pro-hunting stuff in the right tone online, okay? Because it's this hunting is conservation and beat them over the head with it, right? They've heard that. And that isn't working per se, right? It's like a defensive tone in a lot of cases. And especially it's not proactive, right? It's not preemptive. It's always reactive. We're always trying to dig out of a PR hole. Oh shit, there's this news headline. What are we going to say about this? Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Versus trying to improve that conversation and the understanding ahead of time so that maybe those people are going to think to themselves, oh, well, that's actually not true. So this is actually misinformation kind of stuff.
Well, I spent a lot of time, I grew up in Oregon, just in the suburb of Portland. And, it's a very liberal, I guess, left-wing kind of community.
Sure.
And I worked downtown for years in an office, a big corporate office with a very, keep Portland weird type of culture.
Right. Yeah.
And, I loved it there. I really did.
Yeah.
There were things that annoyed me, but it's shocking how many of those people respected me and that I hunted, even though they, on a broad spectrum, sort of looked down on hunting as something that they really detested. But then meeting a hunter, seeing me do what I do, bringing the meat into the office, it really does break boundaries and change perceptions. And I really learned that, especially being in that environment, surrounded by people who really are against hunting, seeing that, actually they're not as against hunting as you think they are.
Right.
From a hunter's perspective, from the out, you might think that all these people, they don't hunt, so they don't get it. But they're like you and me. They like animals. Everybody does.
Right.
Shane Mahoney talks about, you bring a puppy into a nursery and every kid drops the toy they're playing with to go see the puppy. That live animal has far more like instinctive attention that we give it than any sort of toys that we monkeys enjoy grabbing onto. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. And so that's common ground that we should all be able to agree on. Like, we love animals. We want animals to be healthy. We want to have a good ecosystem. Like, that's pretty universal. And so in that regard, I think most of those people that embrace Patagonia and love being outdoors, in general, I think it comes from a good place, that they do love animals and they want to protect them, and they just aren't aware of how it works, just out of ignorance. And I do think that we as hunters have that opportunity and responsibility for the animals that we're basically stewards over, in a sense. We have that responsibility to help spread that message or educate. But I think you're right in the sense that we often do it in a bad way, in a poor way. And that's where it gets really tricky, because there's a lot of hunters that feel, I think, sort of alienated by a publication like the Modern Huntsman, in a sense, because they're like, I hunt for good reasons. I feel like it's okay for me to present my message this way, and there becomes a defensive standpoint.
Right. Well, I think that it's more of a recontextualization, right? Let's stick with the Patagonia example, okay? That I doubt that, most people would disagree with the way that you hunt or the way that I hunt, right? Because we're going about it in a respectful way. There's virtue involved. Most of those people who disagree with it, they're disagreeing with the prevailing image of what a hunter is, right? That isn't you or me. It's I think
that prevailing image is the one that Brando just played in what's that movie on Netflix? The Diary of a Whitetail Hunter. Yeah, just
it's kind of, and I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I just, we all know what we're talking about, right? That sort of, kind of a little bit borderline redneck, like they don't really care. They just want to kill shit. And you know what? And that's fine, right? If that's what they want to do, the problem is that has now become the majority representation of all other hunters. And that's not the case.
Well, I'll be the first to say, like, we did it to ourselves with hunting TV.
Right.
It's just the truth. I've said it many times, and it's not to say that there aren't some really quality, shows out there, but for the great majority, and for a lot of my youth, I graduated high school in 93. I can remember having cable TV and hunting shows on there, and it just was a kill shot reel of 25 animals drop in 20 minutes, and it's like, what? And I think that, yes, it was a bit of an echo chamber. There was a lot of economics and corporate sales tied to all of that, and commercialism.
Right.
And hunting TV really did, I think, have its destructive impact on us sort of indulging in our private corner here, and then all of a sudden we went from, a channel you had to subscribe and pay for to see to, oh, it's all public on social.
Right. And I think that, you addressed it earlier that, there absolutely are people who say, well, why should I have to change what I do? I should be able to post whatever I want. Yeah. I mean, it's a free world, right? It's a free country. However, I think that it depends on what your goals are. If the goal is to protect our hunting heritage and to make sure that we're able to continue to do the things we love to do, it might not be a bad idea to consider the negative impacts that your behaviors can have on the reality of us being able to do what we want to do, right? So yeah, should you be able to share your photos with your buddies? Yeah. Are there consequences for posting bloody trophy photos online in a public forum? Yeah. And there are a lot of organizations that are very well funded and very well organized that use those to sway the emotional beliefs of the public at large against hunting. And so you have to consider your role in further damage or damage control, right? And so that comes down to personal responsibility, right? And this is a very basic thing, right? Some humans are willing to become better people and some are not, right? And it's like you're in a relationship, right? And there's a dispute between you and your partner. You have a choice. You can either decide to swallow your pride and be humble and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to try better. Or you can say, screw you, I'm not going to do that. I am who I am, and that may be the end of it. So personally, I hope that more people would take a little bit softer of an approach and consider the end game here versus our personal. It's not like our freedoms are being infringed upon in that sense, but there are consequences to that. We live in a world where there's international spread of media within seconds. And that's something that we're very aware of, and we are doing our best to present what we feel like are people who are doing it well, thoughtfully, constructively. And we're not trying to slap wrists and point fingers and call names, right? But at the same time, right, we're trying to draw distinctions between the prevailing image of the bad hunter that a lot of people think versus a different story, right? And so we've used the language, shifting the narrative or realigning the perception, whatever you want to call it, trying to showcase that there's a different side of hunting that most people don't read about online because no major news network is focusing on people doing good stuff. They're only focusing on people doing bad stuff. You
have something in the letter from the editor here that I want to read. It says, we're engaging with people who have never hunted or were previously opposed, and we are having constructive conversations with them. We're discussing partnerships with organizations not normally associated with hunting under our common cause of conservation, and encouraging others to represent our tradition in the best possible way. Our cover image from Volume 2 was taken by Chris Burkhardt. He's just an incredible photographer, a non-hunter who believed that awareness of public land was more important than the differences in recreational lifestyle choices that we make, and he's right. And I think that speaks to what we were saying earlier about, having conversations with those and finding common ground and building relationships on that common ground so that maybe over time we can bridge that gap and we can understand them a little more. They can understand us a little more, and we can move forward in positive ways, especially on initiatives like, let's say, public land. It's a perfect example where we can agree on that, but maybe we don't agree on maybe wolves in Idaho, Right. And I think that's super positive. As far as though the image that hunting kind of has in some mainstream places, I feel like it's changed a lot, especially in the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah.
There isn't.
It's getting better. Better, for sure.
Don't you think? I mean, dramatically better.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that because the currency is changing, right? And honestly, and this is the other thing I was going to address, is that I think we could all agree that we would like for there to be more hunters, correct? I mean, there's a threshold there. Yeah. Everyone in the United States can't be a hunter, or it would wipe the game out. But this older demographic, whatever we want to call it, that's getting older and getting out of the field, and we're the younger generation trying to take over. Well, we didn't come up in the same background that our parents did. We're removed from these outdoor agricultural lifestyles in a lot of cases, and a lot of people live in cities, right? And so the backgrounds and the lifestyles that people are coming into hunting are very different from what they were before. And personally, I feel like in a lot of cases, the hunting community sort of chastises people who aren't of the exact same cloth. And that hunting's not going to survive if we don't do that. If we're ostracizing or extraditing or keeping out people who haven't come from the exact same rural or whitetail hunting background or have killed anything with a bow yet, right? Like, if they want to learn how to bow hunt, we should be assisting them and supporting them and getting them out in the field and giving them the resources instead of shaming them and saying, oh, well, you live in wherever you live, and I don't like that because it's not where I live. Mm-hmm. And there's so much conflict and dissension among the hunting community, even amongst even between bow hunters, traditional bow hunters, or compound bow hunters, or guys that wear camo versus solid colors, or custom built rifles versus wood rifle. Like, who cares?
Yeah,
that's not the point. And so I think that, for me, at least, it's important that, and that's why that's been one of the most rewarding things about Modern Huntsman is the emails and the messages and the comments we get from people who said, I have wanted to learn how to hunt for so long, but I was so intimidated because I went into my local shop and it was embarrassing. I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't feel comfortable, and I don't know what to do. My dad never showed me. And not just, men, but women. And we've had a lot of messages from vegans and vegetarians who said, I'm not going to eat meat and I'm not going to hunt, but if I did, I would do it this way because I respect the tone you guys are taking, and we can tell that you have respect for the wildlife. And it's about that access point, providing a less intimidating, a little bit more open-minded, I don't want to say everyone is welcome sort of feel, but kind of, right? That this is important. This is a legacy of hunting heritage that's for, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years, right? Mm-hmm. That really hasn't changed much apart from the tool we're holding in our hand. Hunting hasn't changed that much. And there's amazing ties to culture all over the world. And that should be no different here. And so, I think that's an important point to make, is that, in the same way that some of these people that you met in Portland were open-minded with you telling them, hey, this is the way I do it and this is why it's important. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, I may not go do that, but I'm open-minded to that. Well, we have to do the same thing on the hunting side. We can't be hardline, we're not going to allow the Patagonia employee to come hang out here because they may have been involved in some other marketing initiative or something. Like it's gotta go both ways.
Well, and it's such a, let's face it, hunters, we're a minority. We're not a majority. And so we're going to have to play the PR game all the time. It should be something on the forefront of our minds. I've said this many times. Anytime you post a picture, you should be looking at it from a non-hunter's viewpoint. Provide some context with that picture, let people know that this was an animal shot and then consumed, that it was eaten, that it was harvested. I think that, but I feel like there's sometimes, and this is one of the questions I had for you, when you have, in our rush to sort of, be a good ambassador for hunting and for animals and for the outdoors, I feel like sometimes in our rush to embrace and help those that aren't of our community, let's say, that are from the outside looking in, that sometimes we alienate our own hunting base that is on our side and is passionate about hunting as well. Do you know what I mean? And as there's been a few times where I've gone through and I've seen a post or I've seen something done and it just can come across as very pretentious.
Yeah.
And I think that the Modern Huntsman at times, from the outside looking in, can come across that way to a fellow hunter that doesn't, and so it turns that group off from the message. It almost makes them go and post the bloody photo just to spite the pretentious image that they feel is being portrayed.
Sure. Right. So I would hope that we could change the word pretentious to virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not going to disagree with you. Right. We do have a lofty goal. Right. And I conduct myself with a very strict code of virtues. Right. I've trained in martial arts my whole life. And there's something very meaningful to me about honesty and integrity and loyalty and bravery and those sorts of things, right? Things that represent moral center. Mm-hmm. And while we may not all be able to agree on what those are for hunting, I think there are some inherent virtues of hunting that we would all agree are good things. Okay.
Yeah.
And so my goal, right, and not just my goal, but the people involved in the magazine, has kind of been to be a mirror of an instrument of reflection. Mm-hmm. Right? That causes us as hunters in the hunting community to really think, are we being as virtuous as we can be? And in a lot of cases, the answer is no. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, at times, Modern Huntsman is going to be blamed for being that instrument of reflection, right? Mm-hmm. For calling, and it's not individuals, right? It's more of this sort of call to higher philosophy. Let's call it that. Mm-hmm. And so, I absolutely understand how that can be, because this is something as an individual that I've dealt with in my life, right?
Right.
Because I hold myself to a really high standard, and I've learned that it's not fair for me to hold someone else to those same standards. It's if somebody doesn't want to live their life that way, that is their choice. I'm not going to criticize them or run them down for it. But, I'm a teacher, I've been a coach, I've been a, lecturer and things. It's in my nature to try to help someone who's interested in being better, be better. Right. And so I would say it's kind of aspirational in that sense. And the flip side of that, right, is sometimes you never know, right? You're walking a tight line, and sometimes you step too far one way or the other. And, no matter what we do, there's going to be criticism. And I would hope that, with an opportunity to talk to you like this, it would at least, be that it's not high and mighty. We're looking down on this or that. I'm more concerned about, can we be better? Because I think we can.
I like what you said. And I think that we live in a world right now where you have your, hey, I'm a redneck. I'm proud of it. It's who I am. It's how I grew up. You can shove it, and there's mm-hmm. certain platforms that really preach that message, and what you see is what you get. And I'll be the first to say that a lot of what I see posted in that from a non-hunter perspective, even as a hunter, I find disturbing and upsetting, and it doesn't speak to me and to the motives for why I hunt. I feel like a lot of this discussion is really, so much of it. I think you can't get away from motives. I really think you can't get away from your motives. What are your motives for what you do? And it becomes, it's actually, I think most human beings are quite adept at discerning a person's motives, an individual's motives. And if you're being, let's say, quote unquote, the Bubba Hunter redneck, because for the wrong reasons, let's say, not because it's your culture and how you grew up and you're trying to present it in the right way, but mostly because you're rebellious, you're going to shove it down the other's throat. You're going to create an us versus them kind of culture, and then you're going to benefit from that partisanship by then gaining more and more people to your side as you play the victim card as the minority group that's being victimized by the other group, and everybody rallies around a victim, of course. And now you can justify saying whatever you want about the opposition because you're a victim, you know, and there's those kind of motives. And then on the flip side, let's say on that, you know, quote unquote pretentious side, you have the virtue signaling crowd who's like, hey, I'm pretty awesome. And look at what I've done. And I do things the right way while the rest of you don't. And there's that motive, really. It's not about bringing people together. Again, it's that I'm over here. I'm better than you. Let's surround ourselves with this elite group of people. And let's point out how everyone else is not as good as us. And I think in the middle there with both sides, it's really the motives. Because if it's not so much the actions, it's what is it behind why you're doing what you're doing. And when you're describing having a standard that you've set for yourself, when you're describing virtues that you're aspiring to, those are motives that are far more pure than the virtue signaling motives that I feel our social platforms have really blown up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, but I do think that the Modern Huntsman can have that tendency to look like a virtue signaling platform if it's not communicated well and if the motives aren't actually sincere.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that, like, we got blasted yesterday on, I'm not even going to say the name of the account, saying like, oh, this, you know, pretentious faux intellectual BS built off the backs of stealing people's photos and trust fund kids will do anything these days. I'm like, oh, well, I wish I had a trust fund, but I don't, you know, and I responded and I sent a message that said, hey, you know, I appreciate, I'm trying to open a line of communication here. Have you read the book? Because if you haven't, I'd love to send you a copy. And if you decide you still want to rip us after that, that's fine. But I would prefer if you read the 272 pages that we just produced that address all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that we're constantly dealing with is what gets lost in translation between, you know, we've published over 1,500 pages in a year and a half of really dense content in a really diverse array of regions and people and backgrounds and perspectives, right? And almost none of those have we been criticizing, let's call it, you know, that other way of life or running people down. It has been a very positive tone, right? We're not, you know, shit talking and stuff like that.
Yeah. Let me read this. And this is, I think you hit on, this is a nice segue into what I wanted to get into next anyway. And that was, what is it that what, you know, there's all these, you can speculate from the outside looking in. This is what this publication represents, right? But then there's actually getting your hands on it and actually seeing it. What is it, you know? And right here in the latest edition, it says, in this volume, we're discussing the nuances and intricacies of wildlife management. Being an impossibly broad topic that one could spend a lifetime on, we could never hope to present an authoritative anthology on it. Instead, we've assembled a collection of stories that show a range of regions, species, and conclusions that should at least get you thinking, or better yet, diving into the topics yourself. We'll be discussing the plight of the grizzly bear in the American West, brought from the brink of extinction through protections to a thriving population that now poses threats to ranchers and recreationalists. We'll hear from the traditional Icelandic hunter, whose job it is to control the Arctic fox population so they don't wipe out rare bird species, followed by a chef who takes advantage of wild hog overpopulation in Texas, and on and on. And it's just, yeah, it's a great publication that's covering all of these topics. And if you actually read it, you are not attacking anyone's way of life. You're bringing to light the best aspects, the best parts of what it is to be a hunter today or from any time. Right. And so I think in some ways what we're all experiencing too is an evolution of our message that's changing right before our eyes. And when I disparage hunting TV, you know, obviously there are programs and hunters out there that have done a fine job on that platform. The great majority, though, from what I have seen, has been shall we say, like less than ideal, just to put it politely. It's hurt hunting. It truly has. You know, you listen to Joe Rogan, who definitely from the outside looking in, from a non-hunter's perspective, would look at hunting TV, and he has mentioned, like, I'm like, what is wrong with these people? But then when he comes across someone, you know, that's a great diplomat for hunting in the form of Steven Rinella, it changes his whole idea. He sees he watches Uncharted with Jim Shockey, and he sees a whole world of conservation that he wasn't aware of. And I feel like what we're seeing right now is the natural death of the message that doesn't actually truly speak to what hunting really is for 99% of us hunters, really.
Yeah. And I've kind of likened it to the changing of the guard, right? And so Simon Roosevelt, who I don't know if you've had the privilege of meeting in any of your adventures, but he's the great grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, and I met him like a year before we launched Modern Huntsman, and kind of ran the idea by him, and he's been one of my main advisors through this whole process. And, you know, he's very involved in a very intimidating long bio of all the conservation project he's involved in. And he's a really interesting person because he's older, right? But he thinks like he's much younger. He sees that the future of hunting has to be different than it is now. And so he's been really instrumental in helping me navigate these conversations with leadership of organizations, because it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult conversation to have, to say, hey, listen, we got to do this differently, without saying, you guys are screwing this up. We think we can do it better. Right. Because that's not what we don't want it to come across that way. So it's more of a, hey, listen, you guys are on your way out. We're on our way in. Here's what we're trying to do. And here's what we think needs to happen. Can we get your support so that, you know, we can make this work?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's more like with the Gritty podcast and platform, you know, I'm really trying more than anything to present what I do in a positive and educational light for both the hunter and the non-hunter.
Yeah.
At the same time, I want to be real. So I maybe show a little more than a non-hunter wants to see, but at the same time, I try to provide lots of context to go with it. And I feel like that's my responsibility. And if it is of value, the market will see it and reward it. And if it's not, it will die on the vine.
Right.
And I feel like that's where we're at. Like publications like the Modern Huntsman, it's grown substantially since the first one. Yeah. And it continues to grow. My message, others that I see in the industry, grows. And I think, again, it goes back to, it's what humanity wants to see at the end. And it's really the future.
I agree. No, and I think it's encouraging, you know, to be able to talk with you and hear some of this stuff. And, you know, not that it's any sort of us agreeing with each other in an echo chamber sense, but just, you know, there's increasingly more like-mindedness in that sense, that there's got to be a better way. We're not sure how it is, but we're in the situation where the majority of the hunting industry, a lot of the bigger brands and organizations are still kind of in their way, right? And they're some of them have this white knuckle, I'm going down with the ship mentality. And I don't want the ships to go down. I would like to continue to sail the ship, right? So it's a delicate game. And it's funny because my mother is from a very small town in Texas, and I still don't really think she fully understands what I do for a living. And I told her, I tried to explain it to her one time when the first book came out, and you know, since then, and I'm like, well, have you read any of them? She's like, no, not yet. You know, I was like, well, okay. And I tried to explain it to her, and she goes, wow. She goes, sounds like you're just diving headfirst into controversy. I was like, pretty much, Mom. That's a pretty good distillation of what Modern Huntsman is. We're diving headfirst into controversy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a lofty goal. But I think it's one that's really important, and I'm certainly going to keep trying as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate opportunities like this to clarify a little bit and be able to dive into not just the nuances, but also the other side of it, of how it's perceived and where we could do better or where we could shift the tone to be more effective and things like that.
Well, I think the conservation movement is I can remember listening to Randy Newberg on his podcast, like his second or third episode, and Shane Mahoney was on there, and he blew my mind.
Shane's amazing.
Yeah, and then I listened to other ones, and then Randy mentioned books to read, and I've read now, I don't know, 6 or 7 of his recommended books to learn about conservation, about just our hunting heritage and how it came to be, Roosevelt's role in all of that, and it's completely changed how I understand hunting and conservation and how they work together. And that was a message I grew up hunting my whole life and had no idea about. I really didn't understand. I didn't know any of it. And that was just 5 years ago. And I think that the broader hunting community is figuring this stuff out along with me. We're all along for the ride, and it's pretty exciting to see the shift and the change. And just to put it in perspective, I went and hunted Prince of Wales Island in 2007. It was the first time I ever went there, and Southeast Alaska, and I was hunting black bear, and I shot my first black bear, and we ate it and brought it home, and I remember bringing it into the office and sharing some of the bear sausage and things, and there was so much controversy around killing a bear. I had hundreds and hundreds to thousands of comments for the next, I would say 2007 to 2014. It was 7 years of constant education and discussion and sharing video content and things, photos, explanations. It was a battle. And then, this last spring we harvested 5 bears on a hunt with myself and Stealthy Hunter at Hunt Harvest Health. And Jeff Lusk, a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, the 3 of us, and we harvested the bears. We killed the bears. We shot the bears. We brought them home. We cooked the meat. We canned the bear meat. I had one anti-bear hunting person come out, and I had thousands of comments about bear hunting in a positive way, and thousands of comments on eating bear, how bear really is, how the fat can be used, and all the different aspects of, maximizing that resource. Yeah. And, you're talking about it was really eye-opening this year to see such a cultural shift, and you see it through Meat Eater has many bear hunting episodes, and there's a lot of other publications that have come out, and they've laid that groundwork over time, presenting hunting in the right way. And I can feel it. I can feel the difference, dramatically in just, of course it's anecdotal, but it's powerfully anecdotal compared to how it was in the past. And so if a lot of my friends, family, and others can look at bear hunting now and actually want to go do it next year, we've made some serious changes in the way people see hunting and conservation and predator hunting, and I really feel like it's because the message has changed and it's really making a difference.
Yeah. And I also think, to add to that, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And to go one step further, it's the point of access. The fact that you're talking about it, that you're showing it, that media are showing it, and that then people who previously could never see themselves doing something like that, now they feel like they have a point of access, right? And that's something that if they wanted to do, that you would probably help them with resources or what they need to do, how to get a license, whatever, or you could point them to resources. And so I think that's kind of what it is, and that's something that we're trying to address in some of these issues by showing a diversity of contributors, so that people from different demographics and different regions of the world might be able to connect with one of those stories. And just say, you know what? And so, for instance, this next issue we're doing is an all women's issue. So every story will be focused on women in hunting and conservation and culinary and arts and all that kind of stuff. And that's part of the discussion we've been having is we can't just do an issue about women in the West because there's so many of them, right, out here. And so we're going to have a section of the book called Women of the West where we profile quite a few of these ladies, but we also have to show a wide range of women in other areas, other age groups, other countries, so that what one woman relates to in the South is going to be totally different from somebody in England, right? And so the goal would be to present a wide enough spectrum of stories and perspectives that somebody might be able to find something and say, you know what? That resonates with me, and I could do that, right? And maybe I'm not going to sign up right now, but if the next time someone asks me if I want to go on a bird shoot, I'm going to go and see how it is. I could do that, right?
Yeah.
I could do the tall boots and a glass of wine at the end. Like they could do that, and that's fine, right? But if that's what it takes to get them into the field, right? I can't. How many husbands would be stoked on that, right?
Right. Whatever it takes,
baby. Whatever wine you want, let's go.
Yeah. So. Back to what you were saying earlier, there's a little section here. I loved your letter, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It says, despite most of my career being in the hunting industry, it was a deliberate choice to position ourselves on its periphery, knowing full well the skepticism it would bring and the uphill battle we'd constantly need to fight. This was so we might be able to actually accomplish our mission to improve the reputation of our tradition among non-hunters. And I think that that's a goal that I think some in the hunting community may not quite understand, that a lot of what you're doing is trying to improve the reputation among non-hunters. You're trying to reach non-hunters. And that means your message is going to be slightly different than maybe if I'm talking to my buddies around a campfire on a hunt.
Absolutely.
And it's more like the conversation I'd be having in my office, in my accounting office in downtown Portland, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think as a hunter looking in, it's good for us to follow along with a publication like this, because it helps inform us so that when we're having those conversations with non-hunters, we might be able to do a better job of it, because we're so in our own echo chamber at times. I think it's really tough to know how to frame your message in a way that really can be more impactful to the non-hunter. One more thing I wanted to add was I sat down with Randy Newberg, I think a year ago, and we were talking, and he mentioned how, this came to mind when you told me about your mom. It's like you're just diving headlong into controversy. I think any time that you stand for conservation, and this is what Randy Newberg told me a while back, he's like, you better brace yourself for discomfort. It's going to be uncomfortable. Anytime you're going to stand for conservation. And in my opinion, framing a message that bridges the gap between hunters and non-hunters, like the Modern Huntsman is doing, you're going to be in the crosshairs on both sides, the hunting community and the non-hunting community. And I think that it takes a special type of individual to weather the storm, because you're spending political capital every time you have to go out and present a message and stand for things that you believe in and stand for conservation. And I think it's or hunting tradition. And I think it is a virtuous and noble endeavor. And so I just want to applaud you for that. You're doing a good job. And
thank you.
And
sometimes I wonder, but
and we're all human, and we all can learn. But I'm really enjoying this third issue. I would like to get together down the road, do a little face to face, and actually dive into some of the actual stories that you've put in here, some of them that really interest me, and really break some of those down. Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to the audience to hear that.
I would love to. Yeah. And I feel so honored to be able to work with so many talented people who in most cases are coming to me or us, our editorial team. And we are just inundated with submissions and film ideas and collaborations, and So if anyone's listening that I haven't responded to your email, I'm so sorry. I'm trying, but so when we released volume 3, so in that month leading up to printing, so like April to May, guess how many emails I did?
Oh, I don't even want to know.
3,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone wants to do math, that's more than 100 a day. And I got like the Gmail summary, and I was like, oh my God, no wonder I feel like this. So, we're very blessed, right, to be growing quickly and to be gaining traction and all of that, but without losing sight of things. And it's nice to be reminded every once in a while of why we do this. And the fact that I get to work with people like we have in volume 3 that are just insanely talented and articulate and intelligent and thoughtful people who really believe in what they're doing and are saying it in a way that, no one, I don't know. I personally don't feel like anyone in there is pretentious. I feel like they're all very, of course, we're all strong-willed, right? Yeah. They have something they want to say and they believe in it, to the end of their days. But I have conversations with every single contributor. I read every single story. I'm editing every story. I mean, I have other people helping, but it's a very collaborative experience. And I've told people every time, I say, listen, don't act like you're the expert unless you are, unless you feel like you know more than everyone else. But if there's one person that you could call who knows more than you, you need to call them, because I don't want to get put on the hook for something that you said that isn't right. So, it's more of that tone of, listen, this is what I've learned in my experience, and this is from those experiences, this is my perspective. And yeah, we're hoping that those are thought provoking.
Well, and I would say as a consumer, as someone consuming the content and pouring through it, and I try to do this with, I'm a fan of a lot of different individuals' messaging and content. I love it. As I go through it, I try really hard not to take offense where none is intended. You know what I mean? Like, get some thick skin, people. So as I'm going through it and I read something and I go, I don't like how he said that, Yeah. I don't sit there and go, okay, he's talking about me, or he just pointed a finger at me, or he's wrong. I just, I try to have a thicker skin and all that. And I really don't get as easily offended as I have in the past. And I think we live in an outrage culture, and that's a shame. So having that skin, in the thicker skin, it allows you to, I think, to have real life skills. So you can have conversations with companies like Patagonia, for example, and maybe make some headway with a group of people who we don't see eye to eye with, and then yet accomplish some common good. So I think, thicker skin, everyone needs some of that.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way, right? We keep talking about Patagonia. My goal is to get them to be a paid partner, right? A sponsor to create content that then would be eventually distributed through their channels. So think about that in terms of a win of Patagonia promoting a harvest story of some kind through their own channels. Right. And it's one that we created and collaborated on, and we oversaw and made sure that the message is one that is important and that is the right message. Because if we can make headway in companies like that, or even in fishing space, or, I don't know, Mountain Hardware, or the crossover, my managing editor used to be the editor-in-chief of Snowboard Magazine. Right. And the guy he worked really closely with was Travis Rice, who's a super famous snowboarder that loves to grouse hunt. So we're working on some crossover in lifestyle there. Cause even like Jeff Rowley is a great example, right? He's a badass, famous skater from the golden days who turned major hunter. And a lot of that skate industry turned against him because of just the perceptions of what a hunter is. And so he, is a perfect example of someone who stood for what he believed in. And that's an opportunity to expand the understanding into other genres and other demographics. And now all of a sudden there isn't this segmentation between industries, that now it's more of this, amalgamation of who cares if you're holding a rod or a gun or a rock climbing axe or an ice climbing axe, it's like,
absolutely. I think there's so much common ground out there. Like I said at the outset, I think it's very, very, we have a tendency to think it's us versus them, but at the end of the day, we actually all have we're just like the example of the puppy in the nursery. There's actually so much that is written into our DNA and into us that we all actually fully and 100% agree on. It really just takes a little patience, a little thick skin, a little conversation, a little negotiation, a little diplomacy. You wrote in this thing in the right here, the mission statement. I found it really interesting because it says this publication is told from the perspective of hunting purists and the diplomatically minded. And I was like, that's interesting. Diplomatically minded. What does that mean? And I looked up diplomat because I was curious. I kind of know what it means, but what's the formal definition? Right. And it said skill of managing relationships. Yep. And absolutely. I think that the diplomatically minded hunter is really what we need right now, because we're such a minority, and if we aren't skilled at managing relations, we're not going to do we're not going to be able to help wildlife. We're not going to be able to accomplish those missions, and we're going to lose our traditions. Yeah, I agree. And I think that, it's funny because you now being in the position that I'm in, I think back across, my life and the different places I've lived and the situations I've been in. And I've always been that. I've always been, grew up in Texas, went to school in California, right? And had to kind of explain myself. And this was when George Bush was president. So being a Texan was not very popular. Right. And so I was constantly being put under fire and pressure to justify myself and, prove that I wasn't this or that or the bad guy or whatever. And so it's funny that I had no idea that my entire life prepared me to be, in the crosshairs at all times. But I think that's important, right? And you think about TR, right? You think about Roosevelt and how diplomatic he was, a statesman, right? And his ability to bring people together. And first of all, I'd like to clarify, in no way am I comparing myself to him. I'm just saying as a, something to strive towards, right? A way to conduct yourself. And I wrote about that in the very end, the closing statement in volume 3 about that, this isn't for everybody. Not everybody's going to agree with what I say or what Charles Post says or what Byron says or any of our, right? It's not for everybody, right? But I would hope that if you disagree with what we're saying, that you at least conduct yourself with the same class and respect and dignity that the statesmen and conservationists who've come before us did, right? Yeah. That there was a time in American political history where you could agree to disagree on things. And I don't feel like that is a reality anymore. You're either with us or you're against us, or you're this or that, you're left or right, or you're core. It's very polarized. Like yeah, and I get told, I get ripped all the time that I'm not a core hunter because I don't have dead animals on my Instagram. Well, I wouldn't be able to accomplish my goal very well if I did. And do I hunt? Absolutely. But my hunting experience is backwards, right? I've never killed a bull elk. Right? I've killed a couple of cows, but I could take you on a Cape buffalo hunt right now. Right. I could guide you on that. I just had a conversation with Ryan Lampers last night, good friend of mine, and we were just talking about this. What I really think hunters should hold another hunter's hunting experience is sacred. And what I mean by that is what you value in your hunt and what you experience on your hunt is personal. And it's a taking of an animal's life, and it should be valued for what it is. It should be respected. If you go out and you harvest a 2-year-old deer, but it's your hunt, it's your tag, it's your license, it's your decision. I shouldn't, as a hunter from the outs, project my values on you in terms of, I think you should have shot an older one, or I think you should shoot does, or it gets to be really, when you think about it, very petty. We should really, at the end of the day, respect each individual's choice on how they hunt, what they hunt, where they hunt, so long as we are ethical and responsible and respectful, right?
Right.
So I think it's really poor form for us to judge each other. And I mean, on such superficial levels, you know.
Yeah, and to be fair, right, I think that some of it's a product of let's call it the continuation of the hunting TV, that the currency that was created was, you know, the bigger buck, the bigger bull, the you know, the longer hike, the more weight you carried, and that's fine, right? In terms of personal progression and mountain hunting is something that I don't know a whole lot about. I admire it, and I hope to be in shape enough at one point in my life to be able to do something like that. But I think that you got to take that into contextualization, right? And then there's different types of hunting. And for me personally, it's not really important for people to know what I've hunted or not hunted. Like, that's just not important. And for some people that's important, and that's fine, right? But is that important to you because you are proud of it, or is it important to you because you feel like you have to be accepted within that community by showcasing I'm good enough because I went and did this?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to motives. Not so much what you share, but why you share it, you know, because at the end of the day, if I put something up and I'm doing it, let's say I do harvest a mountain animal that was super incredible. It was just an incredible feat, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, it's this thing. Well, I want to share it because I'm excited. I think it inspires others maybe to try something like it. We all as human beings, I think, respect the individual that's able to do the impossible, let's say, or the difficult, you know? And so in that, it has its redeeming qualities. But I think sometimes that we can get lost in that as the, I guess the standard by which every person should be measured. And if you can't do it, then you have no other value or thing to contribute, or you're not, let's say, authorized to speak on a subject. And I just think, you know, that's kind of the holdover from a past that's no longer relevant, you know? Yeah. I don't really care, honestly. The more people I've hunted with, and I've been fortunate, I've been able to hunt with some amazing hunters. They've mentored me along the way, especially since I kind of went down this path of into the hunting industry. But I'll say what I found across the board is that hunters are just humans that put their pants on like everybody else. Even the most amazing hunters that I've been around have made some dumb mistakes, you know, like at the end of the day, I realized that, people are people. We're pretty, you know, even across the board, you know, it's not. Yeah, absolutely. So I just hate to see see that be even a measuring stick. So Tyler Sharp, let's wrap this up. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How can people get more involved with the Modern Huntsman, and how can they get their hands on the latest volume and the earlier volumes? Is that possible?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the best ways, you know, our Instagram is just at Modern Huntsman, and then it's modernhuntsman.com. You know, if you want to order single issues, we're sold out of volume 1, but we have volume 2 and 3 available. We're going to do a run later this year of volume 1. We're actually going to release a 4-volume issue in like a hardcover sleeve, kind of encyclopedia style, because at this point, these are kind of encyclopedias. And and just, you know, hot insider tip, it's actually, if you subscribe, it's $10 cheaper. And it's free shipping, and basically it just charges your card $30 every 6 months rather than $35 per issue if you order them individually. And so that certainly helps. But yeah, I mean, we're going to really, like I said, we're releasing volume 4 in October for the women's issue. We're going to start doing pre-orders pretty soon on that. And again, you know, I'd encourage you guys to participate in some of the conversations that are happening on our Instagram, right? We're posting a lot of the content from volume 3, and some of this stuff is, you know, fairly nuanced and controversial, but there's been some really cool conversations happening
from people all over the world, some education and things like that. So we'd love to hear what you think and participate. Hopefully that's a respectful, diplomatic tone, but you can't legislate virtue. So, but yeah, we'd love to hear from more people. So
sweet. Well, Tyler, appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on the show again, and let's do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. I really enjoyed it.
All righty. Take care. Stay gritty.
You too.